Hi guys, Goffy here and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to do something a little bit different. I've actually released two videos at the same time, and this video I'm going to talk about all of the regrets I have of moving to Fujifilm as the camera brand that I shoot. And the other video that's also been released is all of the things that I love. I guess for a little bit of perspective, I still shoot Fuji cameras, so I do think that the pros outweigh the cons, but this is going to be the video where I talk about all the things that are either annoying me at the minute or are a bit of a disadvantage of choosing Fuji. Now, I've been shooting Fujifilm cameras for something like 3 to 5 years at this point, so it's not like I've just switched, I'm in this like funny honeymoon period. This is based on like years of using Fuji cameras. And first up then, I want to talk about how I always think that if you're shooting Fuji, you always feel like you're a generation behind the Pioneers, the Sony and the Canon's flagship models. A really good example of this is Canon and Sony have had good autofocus, reliable autofocus for years now, and I do think it's only now with the 5th generation Fuji cameras that we have finally got autofocus that is good enough for video. And now that we've got it, if you still go and use a Sony or a Canon camera and check out their autofocus, it still feels a step ahead. Now, I do think more recently this sort of stuff has started to matter less because I think camera development has started to like tail off a little bit. And I think right now it doesn't really matter if you are a generation behind because we do have good autofocus, and to be honest, cameras like the XH2S do everything I could ever want at this point, and I don't think I really need any more. But if you're somebody who absolutely loves specs, then you might feel a little bit disappointed that there's always a camera out there that's probably a little bit better in every way. And next up then, I want to talk lenses. Now, when it comes to the Fujifilm lens lineup, they have a lens in pretty much every sort of area that you could want. The problem is, some of the lenses in that lineup just aren't very good. I've done a video recently on the 18mm f2. This is a lens that I would absolutely love on paper, but in reality the build quality is a bit rubbish and the autofocus of that lens is terrible and very loud, meaning you can't really use it for video or like sports or anything like that, even if you're using the best camera body Fuji make. And this is something that I don't think really applies too much to other brands. You can always pick up a lens and assume that it's going to be pretty good, whereas in the Fuji lineup you definitely need to do your research. And at the same time, the bit that probably annoys me is you see Fujifilm bringing out some new lenses that are just a little bit bizarre. Like they brought out the 8mm f3.5, very niche lens. They brought out a new macro that's a 30mm, again, a pretty niche lens, rather than fixing what I think is some flaws in their core lineup. Now, in the past, this was made even worse by the fact that Fujifilm would not let third-party lens manufacturers make autofocus lenses. This has changed more recently, and we're now seeing some very good lenses from Sigma and Viltrox. They're the two that stand out to me, and it really helps fill out this lens lineup and give you some much cheaper alternatives. So the bad news, the Fuji lineup isn't all that great, but it does look to be being fixed by some of the third parties. Thirdly then, and I might get a bit of stick for this one, is the fact that I do think the image quality, when you start to raise the ISO a little bit, is noticeably different compared to full frame Leica files in my example. And at base ISO, I couldn't tell the difference. Honestly, I'm not sure I could tell the difference at base ISO, but once you hit 1600, 3200 ISO and you start to like edit by raising the shadows, which is my general editing style, I can definitely tell that the Fuji shadows are noisier. The other thing as well that I can tell, and again, this is a Fuji versus Leica comparison, maybe that's not all that fair because the Fuji lens is probably £300 and the Leica lens is £3,000, but I can definitely tell a little bit of a difference when it comes to sharpness between the two files as well. Now, I guess ultimately, at the end of the day, have you ever looked at a really good photo and thought to yourself, I wish that was a little bit sharper, or I wish the shadows had a little bit less noise? Probably not, but just comparing the files next to each other, because they share the same Lightroom library for me, I can definitely tell the difference between the two. Now, my fourth point then is to do with kind of the state of affairs at the minute. There feels like there's this bit of a dark cloud over Fuji because they've done a really good job at bringing people over to shooting Fuji cameras, predominantly because they make some really interesting cameras like the X Pro line, the XE line, the X100 line. Lots of people love these cameras, but as we sit here right now, all three are currently discontinued with no word of when or if a replacement is coming. Now, I get it. Fuji claimed that they've had some really bad supply issues triggered initially by COVID, but I don't think that gives you a good excuse to leave all of us in the dark as to whether or not our favourite cameras are still going to be made or not. And because of this, the used market has gone absolutely bonkers. I actually had somebody reach out to me a few weeks ago and show me that they'd sold their X100V and with the money bought an XH2S and two of the new primes for less. Now, I do think when the new models come out, if they do come out, these prices will absolutely tank and people are gonna maybe be stuck with some very expensive cameras that are now superseded by a new one. But I do hope that used market returns to normal because that links in very nicely with my next point. And that's the fact that in the past when I was reviewing Fuji cameras, I was normally able to say something like this. This Fuji camera is almost as good as the full frame competition, but it costs way less. And as we sit here today, the value proposition of Fuji has kind of disappeared, and it is partly due to the used market going absolutely insane. If you look at the used market, there is a good chance that you can buy a better full frame camera for the same money as a used Fuji, which is a bit of a shame because that was one of the big draws of Fuji in the past. And when it comes to new cameras, things aren't all that different either. This XH2S was £2,500. At the time that I bought this camera, for cheaper I could have bought a brand new Sony a7 IV. Now for me at the time, I do think I did the right thing because this camera is better in many ways for the things that I cared about, but it goes to show that the value proposition of Fuji has definitely closed down, and that used to be one of the big pros in my early videos. So there we have it then. These are all of the reasons why I personally just have some issues with Fuji at the minute. But I guess importantly, at the end of the day, I still shoot Fuji cameras. I absolutely love them, and I do think the pros outweigh the cons, and the pros video was released at the same time as this one, so definitely check it out. But if you're somebody who is shooting a Fuji camera or has been put off shooting Fuji cameras, I'd be really interested to know your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you for watching, guys, and if you've enjoyed it, please subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.